Welcome back to the Echo Changer podcast with myself, Jacob.
And myself, Harley.
Today, we're going to be diving into another big topic that we haven't really covered before. Definitely something that both of us are pretty keen to get stuck into and to learn about. And excited to bring you guys along with us. We're going to be learning about Egypt today. So this is going to be the first part of probably a short series of episodes where we'll cover kind of the different phases of ancient Egypt, covering everything from the start all the way through to the peak of their empire, all the way to kind of end of ancient Egypt in terms of how we know it.
It's not all that dramatic, I think, is it? The end of
no, it does kind of fizzle out at the end. It's not.
Yeah, they're sort of absorbed into other things.
It's going to be very exciting. I think ancient Egypt is such a huge topic, and I think people obviously know about the pyramids. People know about maybe Tutankhamun potentially.
I feel like everyone knows the image of Tutankhamun, but probably nothing else. That certainly was my experience anyway, sort of growing up.
And
you have an image of the name, and you get those old picture books. You're always coming across those in charity shops. You always come across those massive coffee table books, and it's Tutankhamun's treasures, and just the face on his sarcophagus, and that's about it. I think so. It'd be interesting to delve in a little further because he has quite an interesting story and quite an interesting relationship with his father as well. Slightly Oedipal.
I think also in a country where, well, speaking of the UK, in a country where most of our interpretation of ancient Egypt would probably be watching The Mummy. I do think
which I did for the first time a couple of weeks ago. For my sins, I also watched The Mummy Returns, which is a definite drop-off in quality, but I did enjoy Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson in his, I believe it's his first screen performance coming out of the wrestling world.
Yeah.
And he's actually only in the first scene because famously the last bit that he comes in is the pretty appalling CGI Scorpion King moment.
Yeah,
kind of a bit of a cult classic moment.
It's so bad it's good.
I'm all for animatronics over CGI because CGI dates horribly, and I think there's no better example of that than The Mummy Returns.
Yeah, although I would have been interested to see them try and make The Rock into like a prosthetic scorpion.
Yeah, put him in a Scorpion Man machine. That would be cool.
And he just walks at like half a mile an hour. The action scenes might be a little bit slow. They might have to like speed it up a little bit.
Well, do a sort of silent film kind of Benny Hill thing with the just speed it up at the end. Probably still look better than it does now. But at work, my boss is very nostalgic about it because he married a German woman, they had a kid in Germany, and he was obviously away for many years there, and they saw it in the cinema, and all the kind of iconic bits on Tower Bridge got him all kind of misty-eyed and nostalgic for home. So I was surprised when I mentioned it to him that he was actually a huge fan. I think he's probably the Mummy 2's biggest fan, for purely kind of homesick reasons.
Different films can have a different significance to different people.
Yeah. I'm very excited for The Mummy 4, which hits cinemas in 2028, so a bit of a wait.
Yeah, still a bit off, but it's going to be exciting.
It'd be interesting to see Brendan Fraser getting back in shape, ready for some action. I'm curious to see what they do with it. I think I might just skip The Mummy 3 entirely. It doesn't even look so bad it's good. It just looks
just bad.
So bad.
I mean, there's a very fine balance, so we can talk
I don't know. I mean,
the pantheon of terrible films that are actually good because of it, but I don't think that's
well, you and I were raised on The Room in our film society at uni. I'll never forget getting absolutely plastered watching The Room.
I feel like that's the only possible way to really watch The Room, because other than that, you kind of just
in company,
even more so than with alcohol. But
there's no point watching it alone. You just start thinking, what am I doing with my life if you put it on?
It's a bit sad if you're watching it by yourself. But
I do want to go to Prince Charles Cinema and see Tommy Wiseau at some point.
Yes,
one of his presentations of it.
Yeah, he's there a bit more often now, I believe.
He has a regular spot. I think it's every summer he goes.
Yeah, because I think since he released his other recent film,
it was a sort of Sharknado-y kind of.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it got the same. It didn't get to the same level of cult status as The Room did. He's been loving the publicity, and I think he's at the Prince Charles a bit more often now. So yeah,
he's embraced his role as the kind of jester of modern cinema. I think he struggled at first to understand why people didn't think it was a masterpiece, but I think he understands now, and he embraces the chaos. Better to roll with the punches. Anyway, we've gone a long way. We've gone a long way from ancient Egypt.
How you can end up with going from Tutankhamun to Tommy Wiseau in 2 minutes?
Well, quite off the back of the American Civil War.
I mean,
that's an interesting transition.
I mean, this is basically Doctor Who, but he's got no control over where the TARDIS goes.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Pretty much.
It's malfunctioning.
But there's always context in every turn. There's knowledge at every turn.
Yeah.
You know,
With a Bill and Ted of the history podcast world.
We're gonna have to put that. We're gonna have to make a thumbnail of that.
Yeah, I think so. That's a good historical film. They meet Lincoln and Genghis Khan. They meet at one point. I think Socrates.
Yeah,
it's good, solid historical stuff.
Historically accurate as well. On to ancient Egypt, then. I mean, before we get into it, how about, is there one thing, one person, one aspect of ancient Egypt that you're looking forward to going into in more detail?
I think, well, I mean, it would be a bit obvious to say pyramids, wouldn't it? And we will do the pyramids, of course, because they are incredible. But I remember a few years ago with a guy you would have known, Ed, a friend of mine who was in my band with me. We went and saw Philip Glass's opera, Akhnaten, all about the pharaoh of that name, who famously did away with the kind of polytheistic, well, I think it's horotheism, which is a sense that you've got one primary god, but you accept others. Anyway, he moved away from the purely sort of polytheistic thing and towards a monotheism, focusing on Aten, the sun, as the primary god. It didn't really catch on, as we'll explore later on down the line. His son Tutankhamun was put under heavy pressure after Akhnaten's death to reinstate the old gods. But Philip Glass's opera is absolutely stunning. It's beautiful. He has that incredible minimalist style where he has kind of ostinati building through the various instruments all the time. And instead of being a sort of narrative opera, as you might expect, opera historically is sort of solid 3-act, constant driving narrative, it's actually just a collection of documents being basically read out, which sounds a bit dry, but it is pretty incredible as an experience. Hearing all of these amazing kind of old ancient Egyptian religious documents being read out over Philip Glass's music. There is some sense of narrative, but it's not as you might expect. So anyway, probably for that reason, for sort of personal reasons related to that amazing experience of seeing that at the English National Opera years ago, Akhnaten would be the thing I'm most looking forward to getting to, not in today's episode, but later on down the line.
Yeah.
What about yourself?
To be fair, I think there's a few different areas that are interesting to me. I mean, obviously, we all want to know about the pyramids. I mean, we got to delve into ancient aliens territory here.
You've ruined my big reveal, which was that the aliens built the pyramids, but never mind.
I was hoping that we would prove that, but we could go into it in a bit more detail.
Yeah, you've ruined a spoiler now. That was going to be my big reveal.
Oh, man, I'm sorry. We're going to
have to get back to more boring. Actually, there is an interesting theory around that in recent scholarship that undermines the traditional idea about how they were built. So we will get to that, but it's not quite as exciting. Yeah, it's not quite as exciting as aliens, unfortunately.
No, as few things are. But
conspiracists are kind of fantastically imaginative in coming up with, when they're looking at really quite straightforward, mundane things, they're amazing at coming up with strange, bizarre reasons. But it seems when confronted with truly amazing things, they go the other way and they decide, well, this must have been beyond the power of man. How could anybody possibly do it? It must be aliens. They're overawed by things that are very easily explainable, and then the things that are less explainable, they kind of, rather than putting their great kind of conspiratorial minds to work, they just kind of cop out and say, wow, it must have been aliens. At some point we've been talking about putting our tinfoil hats on and exploring the world of conspiracy theory.
That's gonna be good. I think we definitely need to do that.
After a stiff drink, I think it'd be worth diving into at some point, because some of them are fantastic.
Yeah, give us a week or two to make our tinfoil hats, and then we can get cracking on.
Yeah, exactly.
I think also just on that point, I mean, with the conspiracy stuff, I think there's an element of kind of a romanticism about like kind of associating aliens with ancient civilizations, especially when you consider like one of the main links that people kind of point to is the fact that there are obviously pyramids found in 3 separate civilizations around the world who didn't have any known contact with each other.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Obviously, you have like
you're thinking
of
like the Aztecs. You're thinking about the Aztecs.
Yeah. You obviously had the Egyptians, but then there's also pyramids in Southeast Asia as well.
You wouldn't necessarily call them pyramids, but they're sort of
similar kind of concepts.
Temples. Maybe it was aliens. Maybe we should pack up and go home.
Or maybe
throw our hands up and say it was aliens.
Was it aliens, or is a pyramid just a structurally sound shape?
Jacob, we're not mathematicians. This is far beyond our ken.
It's vibes.
Anything,
that's what it is.
Anything more than 2 sides is beyond me. I can't. Triangles and squares don't even.
You do know there's a third dimension
No, stop it.
Oh,
Stop it. I don't like it.
It'd
I
be,
don't like it. It's
yeah,
scary.
like the watching the Holy Grail, Monty Python and the Holy Grail when
Yeah.
you're in the field.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Trying to conceptualize different forms of government.
Anarcho-syndicalist peasants, yeah. That's a good one. On that, there is an interesting Victorian, because you know the classic author who tackles maths the best is obviously Lewis Carroll with Alice in Wonderland. But there is another guy, and I can't remember his name, and I was reading a book about the fourth dimension by a physicist, Rudy Rucker. And he tells you about this sort of, he's now forgotten really, but he had this kind of world of two-dimensional shapes, and the shapes have to interact with one another, and then I think a kind of three-dimensional shape comes into their universe and he's kind of exiled because they don't understand him. And so there's a kind of similarly surreal kind of Alice in Wonderland vibe, but specifically with geometry. He shows you original illustrations from the book, and they're quite funny. They're various shapes and they're sort of two-dimensional. You can see one eye and a little sort of smile drawn on. Anyway, again, we've
gone on a big old tangent. I think if I had to pick out one thing, I want to understand a bit more about Rome's relationship with Egypt, and also more of like the intellectual side of Egypt. Obviously, you had the lighthouse of Alexandria, which famously was burnt down and subsequently set humanity back by about 500 or more years in terms of the knowledge that was in there.
There are actually two libraries of Alexandria, and there's a great film called Agora with Rachel Weisz playing the Greek mathematician. Gosh, I'm going to forget her name now, but we can always put it up. But that's much, much later. It's sort of 500, 600 AD, and it's kind of early Christians fighting with the Jews. It's all sort of sectional warfare going on. And the second library, which is much smaller, which kind of contains what was not burnt in the first time, also gets destroyed in this, and you think, oh guys, come on, stop burning this poor library down. It's on its last knees. It's a tiny little, it's like a reading room basically. Even the poor old reading room doesn't survive the ravages of warfare. You do feel for her because she's trying to kind of save what she can, but it wasn't to be. It's a beautiful film, very thoughtful, kind of slow. I don't quite know how it kind of got made because it's got sort of Hollywood resources behind it, but it's just a really interesting, slow, meditative kind of telling of the life of a Greek mathematician. Depending on how far our series on Egypt goes, we could even get to it at some point because it is interesting. The sort of political events surrounding all of that with the early, I think it's Bishop Cyril first possibly in the early church, the sort of Eastern church, how that kind of relates to it is fascinating, and how it limits what she's able to do as a mathematician, in a bit like Galileo found later on.
Let's get into Egypt. I think the best place to go from is to understand kind of scale and span of ancient Egypt, because we covered, I mean, obviously in our Empire series, we covered some different empires throughout history. We covered British Empire, a bit of the Roman Empire as well, and some others. Obviously, some empires last 100 years, some last less than 100 years, some may last 500 years. But take a wild guess at how long ancient Egypt lasted.
I suppose this isn't really fair because I have had a chance to look at it, but it is about 3.5. Well, obviously stretches back further, but in terms of the sort of classic dynasties, it's about 3,500 years. It obviously goes back even further. I mean, as we'll see in a minute, first rumblings of civilization were happening in 17,000 BC.
You're correct in the sense that, like, ancient Egypt, as the entity that we know it as, lasted for roughly kind of 3,500 years. So that's from 3000 BC all the way through to kind of like the early centuries AD. It's kind of crazy when you think that that's now about 5,500 years ago.
Yeah.
And
amazing.
And then also you have to put into perspective that modern humans have been around for at least 100,000 years. We have hardly any of that documented because either they didn't have the means or ability to write down their history or to document things. We're diving into conspiracy territory here, but maybe there was a civilization that collapsed and there's no trace anymore. We don't know anything about
Atlantis.
Yeah.
Let's do Atlantis at some point.
Yeah, we can do Atlantis
Love
too.
it. Let's be like James Cameron and get obsessed with finding Atlantis.
We're on a field trip. We'll take Echo Change a field trip.
He did a documentary, James Cameron, with his submarine because he loves his submarines. He goes down in various locations in the Mediterranean trying to find Atlantis. Alas, he doesn't, of course, but he's obsessed. He's absolutely obsessed with it. That's right. He's right that he should be because it's fascinating. And for Lord of the Rings fans, in the Silmarillion, the island of Númenor, where the kind of first kings of men come from, that's supposedly based on Atlantis. Tolkien was fascinated by it.
Yeah.
Again, we digress.
No, it's all good, all good. In terms of the very beginnings, like we mentioned it already, that there was society in Egypt before, obviously, the dynasties. It's kind of widely known or widely kind of documented that a lot of Mediterranean civilizations kind of originated in the Levant. There was a lot of the name. I think is the Phoenicians.
Yeah, the Phoenicians, not to be confused with the Venetians.
No. That's a bit later down the line.
And a little side note on the Phoenicians: Maltese, not the nice chocolates that we all love.
Maltese,
the language. Yeah, Maltese is the only surviving language, the only living language that has traces of Phoenician still in it, and it's freaky to look at Maltese. Apologies to Maltese people. Not that I doubt we have any Maltese fans.
We're getting cancelled in Malta.
I love the Maltese. I went to Malta, and it's a fabulous place, and they've got an incredible history. They're an incredibly hardy people. I went while I was there on Palm Sunday a couple of years ago. I was lucky to be there just in the lead up to Easter to see the celebrations, and I went to a mass in the main cathedral there. And the bishop was giving a sermon, and it's an extraordinary language to listen to because it has a bit of Arabic in there, a bit of Italian, a little bit of English too. At one point he was chattering away and I couldn't quite, obviously I had no idea what was going on. I knew we were in the sermon, I knew that much. And suddenly he says, barbecue. And I thought, oh, there we go, I know, barbecue. I felt like I was suddenly in on the joke for a brief second. No, but the Maltese language is extraordinary. And it's weird to look at because in reconciling all these different elements, it has a million diacritics. You know, it has sort of umlauts and just everything. It's a nightmare to look at visually. Yeah. Part of that is because they've still got that unique kind of influence from the Phoenicians, who were a great Mediterranean. Obviously, you know, they would trade across the Mediterranean.
It gave rise to Carthage. In some ways, ancient Greece, or like kind of Anatolian early civilizations, Egypt, North Africa, everywhere pretty much.
And then you've obviously got the Mesopotamians, what's now modern day Iraq. Hieroglyphics that we'll probably come to at some point. The Egyptian script is based on cuneiform, which was developed by the Mesopotamians. A bit of a cross-fertilization, a bit of a sense, as we might get to later, of cross-fertilization between cultures, between civilizations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess like the timelines. The best way of visualizing it, that I remember learning the fact that even to the Roman Empire at like the height of Rome, so we're talking, 0 AD, were further from the pyramids being built as we are from the Romans now.
Yeah, about 400 or 500 years further. Yeah. And I was thinking about this in another light earlier. It would be a little bit like us coming across an ancient Roman today, because it would be a similar sort of paradigm shift too, because obviously the Romans were a more advanced society in many ways. So it would be a little bit like us coming across a sort of centurion in his full centurion outfit, and that not being strange, which seems bonkers, because when they came across Egyptians, they would have been very much like the Egyptians were sort of 2,000 years before them. So not only are they even further back, you've got that sort of sense of antiquity, even for the Romans, they are an ancient people. But it would be just like us coming across and trying to have a conversation with an ancient Roman in our modern day setting.
Trying to take a Roman centurion to Greece.
Give him a sausage roll.
Yeah, give him a sausage roll, send them on his way.
Good hearty meal for a centurion.
Take him to Scotland and show him how we managed to get further than they did.
He'll run away. He'll have bad memories of. You'll trigger him if you take him to Scotland.
Just like biologically wired to go sit in a guard tower on Hadrian's Wall.
And not go any further. You'd freak him out if you showed him a Scot.
Fry his brain at that point, I think, yeah.
Deep fry his brain, yeah.
Deep fry his brain, give him a bit of iron brew, right his brain at that point.
Iron brew, wow.
Yeah.
You could march on iron brew.
I think you absolutely could.
Good solid stuff.
Yeah. But
put hairs on your chest.
Obviously, I think that's one of the things that really blew my mind when I first started reading a bit more about Egypt is just the sheer scale of it compared to other like empires and civilizations.
Yeah. And
I think just the sheer amount of continuity that they had in terms of their religion, their kind of social structure, and kind of their way of life. Everything's affected by, different kind of outside entities at some stage or another. But by and large, for the best part of 3,500 years, they kept the same kind of thing going and, were successful.
Incredible longevity.
Yeah, absolutely.
They had their ups and downs as we will explore, but they managed to survive. They were never, until eventually they were. Yeah. They were never overtaken by another people. Even then later, it's not like a sort of barbarian invasion. No. They are just sort of absorbed, a bit like lots of other people were. It's sort of absorbed into the Roman Empire. They sort of lose their identity in that sense, but there's never a sort of violent fall of Egypt to another civilization.
Yeah, I think a lot of the stuff it happens quite slowly. Obviously, there's some periods where obviously they have conflicts with other sort of civilizations, like the Persians, Libyans, maybe as well.
Yeah.
Where there's obviously kind of geographic, regional strife in that, and obviously there's also the kind of absorption of Egypt into the Macedonian Empire under Alexander, being absorbed into Rome towards the end as well. The way, even when you learn about like Egypt viewed through the lens of the Romans or viewed through the lens of Alexander the Great and the Macedonians, all of them kind of have this reverence of Egypt as this kind of real beacon of society in a way, like as this beacon of history and culture and religion as well. I mean, Alexander the Great obviously was kind of obsessed with becoming pharaoh and being chosen by the gods to lead in. That's incredible. Like out of the world, in a world where so much changed so quickly, I think Egypt was probably to certain sections of the ancient world the continuity in that particular kind of period of time.
No, extraordinary, absolutely.
Yeah, we've covered a bit of the scale, but what we want to do with this series is we want to kind of break down some different stages of the empire, or well, I guess of the empire of ancient Egypt,
the civilization.
Yeah, civilization of ancient Egypt. We wanted to break it down into a bit more kind of bite-sized pieces.
Going back to our episodes on empire, maybe the reason they lasted so long was they didn't try and have an empire.
Yeah, literally. Basically, if you don't go and antagonize people, then maybe you'll be okay.
I suppose they do in a sense. There's a bit of heading into sort of Nubia south and all that kind of stuff, but they don't expand in the sense that the Romans expanded.
There's no grand conquest.
Maybe that's very maybe if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And also they've got the Nile. They've got the Nile, which is a beautiful resource. And well, I won't say too much about it because we'll get onto it in a sec. But to be fair to everyone else, the Egyptians were kind of unfairly given a massive advantage by having the Nile.
They really got buffed
right
at
there.
the start.
If you're going to have a sort of head start, I think the Nile is a pretty good one.
It's like starting a game of Civilization, Age of Empires. You get whacked next to the Nile, you're set up for a good time.
Yeah, exactly. Good little ace to have up your sleeve.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's the Nile.